Started here soon. Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Gerwitz, and I am the president of the World Trade Center here in Denver. If I can ask you to mute your microphones just for the time being. We do have a presentation today that I don't want to disrupt our presenter. But of course, there's always opportunities on our events to get your questions answered. So what I'd like to do is ask you to put your questions in the chat box if you would, and I'll call on you. And certainly after the presentations, we'll open it up for dialogue. So welcome to our event, Pirates, Droughts, and Wars, oh my. There's so much going on in today's oceans that we thought it was timely to bring forward this event. And we want to thank Crane for collaborating with us on this, and especially Mark Saxelby, who you all know and love. And Mark is a big supporter of our World Trade Center community here in Denver. And really want to give you props for helping spread the word on this event, Mark. So thank you for everything that you've done.
You're welcome, Karen. Just to go to record, I'm not loved by everybody. And I think Rob can be the first one that will agree to that, right, Rob?
Perfect. Well, to know you is to love you, I think. So anyway, thank you for everything that you do for us. Let me just tell you a little bit about what we're in store for today. And also I want to tell you a little bit about the World Trade Center. Some of you are not members of the World Trade Center Denver, yet we are a network of global trade professionals and those that support those in global trade. And so we're actually one of the more active World Trade Centers in our nation and in our North American region. So highly recommend you to check us out if you haven't ever been to our events before. We're grateful that you're here today. And I just wanted to say that the World Trade Center Network is been around for 37 years, convening and gathering the global business community here in the Rocky Mountain region. And we're just launching a brand new digital portal as well called the Global Hub. And after this event, we'd like to invite you to join that that digital hub. It's free of charge. It's just, let's keep the conversation going. This is going to generate a lot of news for you and interesting tidbits on some of the ocean challenges that shippers are faced with every day. So let's keep that conversation flowing on the Global Hub, and hopefully some of our experts here can chime in and provide us some guidance as well. So Karen Moore, my colleague, is going to be sending out an email to all of you, inviting you to create a profile on that Global Hub. And really, it's a free profile, a free access. We just want to keep our community connected year round, and not just on the 80 events that we put on. So really happy to see you all here in person. People are still joining us, so I'm gonna gab on for just a tad bit before I introduce our speakers today. The event here today is really to highlight some of the challenges that companies are facing. We're also featuring two Colorado companies, Rupes International and Nite. They'll be speaking today too about their stories with the challenges and how they're overcoming supply chain challenges and various trade shipping challenges. But it truly is my privilege and pleasure to introduce our expert that's going to set the stage today. So I'd like to introduce Gene Ota, who is the Vice President of Ocean for Crane, and he is an expert of he knows so much about what's going on worldwide and some of the challenges that we face now in the Red Sea and others, and of course now Baltimore too. So we'd love to hit on all of that today, Gene, and we want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise. Before I turn it over to you, just out of privilege here, let me ask if we have anybody representing the World Trade Center Baltimore on the call today, because I did ask them to join us if they could. Well, our hearts go out to Baltimore and
Started. Okay, sorry. Where did you
sorry.
say
um our hearts go out to Baltimore, and the World Trade Center there works very closely with the port, and so they are got their hands full with recovery and cleanup and moving things along. So they probably hopefully they'll join us at some point. But really, just wanted to see if they were here. Maybe they'll join us in a bit. Let me turn it over now to Jean Oda to just give us the lay of the land of what's happening in our oceans today, and how companies can best prepare themselves going forward. Jean, let me turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Karen. It's a privilege and honor to join you all here as well. So as you know, or I think we're all gluttons for punishment, right? Especially if we're in the shipping industry and if we're dealing with international shipping or even domestic shipping, every single year as we go through contract season or our contracting period, when we talk about rates, when we talk about the market, there's always something going on. There's always some drama. So I guess we thrive off of this stuff. But anyway, as of last week, and I think a lot of you are aware of what happened in Baltimore, early in the morning, around 1:30 in the morning on Tuesday, a Maersk Line chartered vessel called the Dolly had lost power and struck a bridge, this Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, on her voyage out from Baltimore to Colombo, Sri Lanka. So as a result of the impact, the bridge collapsed into the harbor, and right now the U.S. Navy salvage vessels or salvage crews are out there scrambling to clear more than 4,000 tons of debris. So even once that's removed, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has to get in there to determine if there's any damage to the 50 feet deep, 800 feet wide channel as well. So right now, as far as what we're hearing, there's no firm timeline yet in terms of when that port is going to reopen. So just a little background on Baltimore's Seagirt terminal, and I'm just talking about the container terminal for now. The terminal handled 1.12 million TEUs last year, and basically is the home for 4 different services from Asia Pacific, or to and from Asia Pacific. Includes the TP-12, or the Empire service between MSC and Maersk, the Taiwan Strait, or the AWE-3 service with the Ocean Alliance, the Santana service with MSC, and ZXB service with ZIM. There's also transatlantic services that call Baltimore. 2M has 2 services that call that port, and there's also other carriers that call India and South America services that call Baltimore as well. So, as I mentioned, I mean, there's plenty of services that are impacted by the recent events, and right now the contingency plan, or the alternate option really to avoid Baltimore, is to route things through New York, New Jersey, Norfolk, Wilmington, Philadelphia, and Wilmington and Philadelphia. So Wilmington, Philadelphia, and Norfolk are between 120 and 160 miles away from Baltimore. But right now we're hearing, based on the congestion at the terminals, perhaps the lack of truckers or lack of flatbed trucks that are required to move some of those containers. It's going to be a good 2 to 3 months before any sort of backlog is cleared from that immediate area. East Coast ports, what are they doing to pretty much get around this or help out the situation? Is basically, so far, New York and New Jersey, Norfolk, they've extended their gate hours. So their opening times at the gates to allow for additional containers in and out of the terminals. The CSX rail service, as of today, they just opened up a new service, a daily service that's going to be able to transport about 150 containers a day from Baltimore, to and from Baltimore, and the Kearny, New Jersey ramp. So hopefully that'll alleviate or eliminate many of the concerns that we have in terms of congestion or delays or cargo being left behind. But in terms of contingency plans for routing imports and exports into and out of the Baltimore area, it's really going to be covered by these alternate ports. There has been some concerns from the shipping community in regard to whether or not these ports, alternate ports, can handle the additional volume that's going to come from Baltimore. Baltimore happens to be one of the smaller ports on the U.S. East Coast for containerized volume. They're big. They're number one. They're the number one port when it comes to bulk cargo. But when it comes to containerized volumes, they're one of the smaller ports. So New York and New Jersey, and of course Norfolk, they're just saying, well, we had a 20% surge in volume during the pandemic. So, even with this additional volume that's coming from Baltimore now, that they should be able to handle it. So that's what's going on in Baltimore right now. Other issues, there are plenty of other issues, of course, when it comes to any impacts to our shipping. The next one is the Red Sea. Cargo ships that are going through the Red Sea have been subjected to attacks by the Houthi rebels. They've caused a significant disruption in shipping, as you all know, for anything going through the Red Sea, going up to the Suez Canal, which has been a critical waterway for global trade. So especially for Asia-Europe volumes, as well as cargo coming out of Southeast Asia or West Asia going to the U.S. East Coast. So now that the vessels have been, basically, I think we've all heard in the news that the vessels have been attacked time and again by these Houthi rebels. And based on that, costs have gone up significantly. So there's a big impact on insurance. There's an impact on fuel, security, and transit time as well. So right now, the average transit time has increased between 10 to 20 days going from Asia into North Europe. That means that also equates to 35% or approximately 35% additional spend on fuel. And also the spend for additional security personnel, enhanced surveillance systems, et cetera. So I think you've all, from a shipping community, as well as us on the forwarding side, have also experienced a lot of increases for the Asia-Europe trade, intra-Asia, and Trans-Pacific. So regardless of which trade that you're involved in shipping, we've all been impacted by the Red Sea situation. So, and I think the last major issue right now, at least that we're dealing with at the moment, is the Panama Canal. So there have been delays on the Panama Canal for a myriad of reasons, but the major one is due to the drought. So there's a huge drought, if you are not already aware, in Panama. Caused by El Nino and just weather conditions or changes to the weather in general. There hasn't been much rain to feed Lake Gatun, which is the primary lake that's feeding fresh water into the locks at the Panama Canal. So with that, the water levels are critically low. The vessels, have to watch out for the draft. So basically, we need to keep or they need to keep a certain level, or they need to make sure that they float at a certain height, I guess you can call it. I'm trying to make it easy to understand, but basically, if you are too low in the water, you end up scraping the bottom, and we can't have vessels being grounded at the canal. So carriers have been trying to get around this by lightening their loads coming out of Asia, putting less containers on board or using smaller ships, but it has caused a little bit of congestion because the Panama Canal Authority has also been limiting the amount of carriers or a number of vessels that can transit the canal on a daily basis. So until the water levels return to a more normal level, or until until Panama can get a huge amount of rain, we don't foresee the delays at the Panama Canal getting any better. And so right now, or at least the carriers have had to slash the vessel crossings by about 40%. They've also had to reduce their loads, as I mentioned, to make sure that the vessels can get through without issue. And basically, we're hearing that the situation will not clear until the end of 2024. So this condition, as well as now the Baltimore issue, as well as the Red Sea challenges, have been creating major problems in shipping. One thing that we've been doing to get around the Panama Canal situation is to route cargo through the West Coast, whether it's the U.S. West Coast or Canadian West Coast, to the interior points of the U.S. for all imports. Exports have been working this in a similar fashion. We've been trying to move cargo over the U.S. West Coast back to Asia rather than on an all-water service going from the U.S. East Coast back to Asia. The challenges for the Red Sea, I think no one really wants the longer transit time, or one really wants to deal with the longer transit time or the higher costs, but sometimes cargo just needs to move from Asia to Europe. In the past, many providers have come up with sea air options. So basically, cargo would go from the Far East to Europe through the Middle East. Of course, nobody really wants to move anything to the Middle East right now, but it would go on an ocean vessel to, say, Jebel Ali. From there, it'd be transferred or rehandled, and then put on a flight to North Europe. We've come up with an alternate means to that to try and get around routing anything to the Middle East. So for any shipments that do need to be expedited but don't require an air freight solution immediately, or something that can survive a little bit longer transit time, we've been putting cargo on in Asia and using an expedited ocean service to the West Coast, or specifically Los Angeles, getting it rehandled there and flying that cargo from Los Angeles to locations like Amsterdam or Frankfurt. Sea air options seem to be a good contingency plan that we've put in place and has been working. And I think it's going to be, that or coming up with creative solutions, coming up with contingency plans, or making sure that you have alternatives to your standard routing, and being flexible is going to be the name of the game moving forward as we look at the 2024-2025 shipping year. So again, flexibility is key, and please make sure you put in a lot of buffer, depending on the trade lane that you're dealing with, but a lot of buffer to account for these challenges, whether it's congestion, whether it's blank sailings, and anything else that may come our way.
Great. Thank you, Gene. How much buffer are we talking?
I think probably about 7 to 10 days buffer.
Okay.
But it all depends on how your supply chain looks.
Sure.
Right. So if we're going to the interior of the US, or say we're shipping to Denver, or we're just shipping into Chicago, make sure that it's not just all going through Los Angeles. Try to find alternate discharge ports like Seattle or Tacoma, or even considering a Canadian discharge port like Vancouver or Prince Rupert.
Okay.
And just looking at alternate means of transportation, or shipping LCL, less than container load, if in case you don't have enough to fill a full container, or as a downgrade to maybe air freight for some more urgent shipments.
Wow. Well, thanks for the lay of the land. You also just went to the TPM conference where the industry heavies are all at, and they're setting prices and talking shop. What did you learn there? What can you share with us?
Well, there's a big there's a big focus on cost cutting, right? I think
Sure.
from a shipper's perspective, or even from our perspective, I mean, cost cutting is very important. From the ocean carrier's perspective, it's going to be about cost recovery. But not only is there a big focus on that, and that focus is there every single year. We all want to make sure that we're making sure that we're getting the best deals out there, that we are cutting our costs, and trying to get the most efficient means of transport in place. But I think a lot of people, or a lot of customers and carriers alike, but they're all looking at supply chain improvements. How can we improve our supply chain? How can we improve or get consistency back to shipping?
Just wanted to convey
Max,
an
can you
update.
put yourself on mute, please? Thanks.
So getting back to consistency. So, where transit time used to be, I think, or on-time performance on a port-to-port basis used to be like in the high 80 percentile, right? 80%, 90%. And the carrier that was taking the lead with that was Maersk Line in the past. But over the years, especially during the pandemic and ever since then, especially with the number of blank sailings or avoided sailings, when it comes to regularity or knowing when to expect your cargo, had become it's just like, you know, trying to just look at a crystal ball, just wondering when can I receive my shipment? How consistent is it going to be? Is it going to be delayed by the Panama Canal, or is there rail congestion on the West Coast? What's going on? So a lot of the carriers have been talking about getting back to you know, the 80-90% on-time performance from where they are today, which is a little bit less than 50% globally. So, you know, getting back to consistency or regular shipments was important, as well as a lot of customers, as well as carriers, have been talking about sustainability,
Mhm.
right? So that's a big buzzword,
Yeah.
as cold chain was a few years
Yeah,
ago.
for sure.
Now it's you know, sustainability. You know, let's talk about the environment. Let's talk about what's going on. You know, what's going on with the Panama Canal, right? It could be, you know, global warming. It could be impacted by that. But sustainability is very important for a lot of our clients. But you know, how do we get there, especially now in today's environment, right? So it's not necessarily a sustainable option to route things through or around the Cape of Good Hope when it costs 35% more fuel,
Sure.
right? But you know, how else is anyone going to get their goods? And so I think some clients have been saying, well, instead of air freight, ocean freight is the most sustainable option. So even though it's a longer transit time, even though it costs more fuel, it's still the most sustainable option compared to air freight. So, you know, we'll stick with that. But I think clients and carriers are also focusing on the green movement and making sure that they're trying to take out as much out of the supply chain, but also trying to be a little bit more transparent about their sustainability measures.
Right.
Now, how they measure that, I think it's still going to be up in the air. Each carrier measures their, you know, sustainability or carbon footprint differently. But yeah, that was a major topic at TPM.
Did you see any like major innovations in the sustainability effort where, I don't know, you're getting ships running on hydrogen or anything like that? Like any recycled ocean water? I don't know. Is anybody doing something cool
LNG.
like that where they can
Right. I mean, there have been some talks about that, but then again, you know, is that while people talk about the need for that, I'm not sure if everyone is ready for that yet.
Yeah.
So I think we all, as consumers, remember when the airlines initially came out with, you know, it's like you're trying to be green and covering your carbon footprint. And you would try to get a flight with United from LA to New York, and it's a $500 ticket, and it says, well, if you pay $150, would you be willing to pay extra to offset your carbon footprint?
Sure.
And a lot of people just say, no, I don't think so. Now, are people willing to pay more?
I think probably more and more are, for sure. It's definitely top of mind. Yeah, for sure.
So are consumers now willing to actually pay up for that?
Yeah.
And with the global economy being the way it is, with inflation, you know, everywhere, do we have deep enough pockets to do that as well? Is this the right time to do that? So there raises a lot of major questions when it comes to that.
Sure.
So
let me just ask you a little bit about pricing. So I'm guessing it's probably one of your number one questions you get is what percentage increase are we looking at from all these challenges? Is it, you know, 10%? Is it 40% or higher for shipping?
I think
Roughly.
it depends on where you're moving and the market conditions in each of the regions. But I think I foresee a 10 to 20% increase at the very minimum.
Okay.
But then again, it also depends on what the carriers do today, right? So I think they've been keeping the rate levels high. If we're just talking about Trans-Pacific eastbound, for instance, and I know that's on everyone's minds because it's our primary contract season right now. But if we talk about the rate levels, I think a lot of people are expecting pretty much a rollover of last year's rates or slightly more because of the additional costs, like I mentioned, about security and fuel and insurance and whatnot. That's costing the carriers. That's pretty much you know, cascaded into every other trade. So I think there might be a 10 to 15% increase over last year's rate levels. But when it comes to sustainability, that's another thing that might add to your cost. So it
Perfect.
really depends on where and how the situation goes with the Red Sea, the
Great.
Panama Canal, and
Yeah.
a whole slew of other things, right?
Yeah, of
There's the
course. Well, we're going to have lots of questions for you, so make sure you start putting those in the chat. If you have those, I'll be happy to work those in. I'd like to get some reflections from our two Colorado companies we're featuring, just to see, like, is anything that Jean's talked about, is that directly impacting you? And if so, could you share a little bit about that? We've got Rob Volkert, who is the CEO of Rupes USA. And then we have Mike Fields, excuse me, who's the Global Logistics and Trade Compliance for Nite. Mike or Rob, do you have anything you'd like to just reflections on what Jean has presented here? Anything that maybe was an aha moment, or was it all stuff that you guys are facing on the daily? Either one of you could start.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Rob.
Unfortunately, we're a relatively small company. We're manufacturing polishers, sanders, and we've got a very global supply chain because we have a parent company in Italy, and so we're kind of stuck in having our vendors all around the planet, and very few of our vendors are here in the U.S. So really everything that Jean mentioned and all the issues that we've had over the years have just kind of directly impacted us. So it hasn't been a lot that we can do. We kind of are a small guy and we have to just sort of sit back and wait for those things to happen, unfortunately. But we have come up with some ways to mitigate it. And usually it's just cash, meaning it's just inventory. So for COVID, for all of the issues that we've been facing recently, we have just made a conscious decision to figure out our cost elsewhere so that we can get a little bit of extra inventory where we used to have maybe 2 to 3 months of inventory on hand. With these increases in supply chain, we've had to take that up to 6 months and sometimes 9 months with some of our products. So it's hit us very hard from a cash perspective, but we've been able to kind of keep things going. As far as other mitigation things, we've done a good job of trying to get as much supply just directly here from the US. But what we found is that, as we have this global economy, so many of those raw materials for those US suppliers are still coming from overseas. So we haven't really solved anything by doing that. So it's been a challenge. And as a small guy, you just kind of have to sit back and kind of just grin and bear it to some extent.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. And 6 months inventory, that's tough. Do you guys have to get extra warehousing then?
Well, yeah, we opened another warehouse down in Houston
Okay.
a couple of years ago, and that made sense for us to be right by the port
Sure.
for some of our manufacturing and some of the products that come over from Asia. So yes, we've turned that into also a distribution center, like our distribution center here in Louisville.
Perfect. All right. Well, hopefully this is a temporary situation, but what's it like working? You're a client of Crane. How is it that they guide you through this process? It's a small company. It'd be nice to hear sort of how you work with them as a partner.
Yeah, we came to Crane some time ago because since they are such a global player, our colleagues in Italy started working with Crane on the export side from exporting out of Italy. And so I could say, Mark wouldn't like this, but I could say we got stuck with them because of our Italian friends. But no, it's been a great relationship. They've done all that they can, and I know that Crane, is they really try to just keep their cost as low as they can. And the local team here in Denver for sure works with us on a daily basis, really, because we're constantly moving stuff. We've got probably 30 some containers in play right now on the import side and like 9 or so on the export side. So there seems to always be something going on, and Mark and the team over there have been great to work with and really given us some good ideas about different options. With, like Jean mentioned, one of them that we've done in the past is move things just to the East Coast and then and then kind of bit the bullet a little bit and moved them across the country via rail or truck,
Mhm.
just to get things here. So that's been an option, but they're always available for those kinds of consultations for sure.
Great, perfect. Well, thanks for sharing your story. Mike, let's hear from you. What sort of reflections or aha moments did you have during Jean's presentation, or are you up to speed on all this? And maybe just share a little bit about your story as well.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Well, thankfully, we're not anywhere near as directly impacted as kind of what Rob was saying. We have more probably a ripple effect. Obviously, increased prices, scarcity of equipment is another thing that mainly more happened directly after a lot of the issues in the Red Sea happened. Maybe not being able to get the containers that we were wanting or having them in the wrong locations. So kind of having to pivot and make sure that, okay, well, our first option wasn't there. How about our second option or a potential third option, or rerouting the goods to a different origin port instead of the primary port that we're moving that might not have the same kind of equipment issues as the one that we normally are working with. So that's the big thing that we're kind of facing right now, is like more of a ripple effect or tangential impact of the issues that we're seeing, specifically relating to the kind of the Red Sea and some of the Panama Canal stuff, because
Okay.
our supply chain primarily moves in the opposite direction
Okay.
of the Red Sea. So we're not really stuck with that, but obviously we see the impact when we have to move air freight, because we're not immune to not moving air freight. We do a fair amount of air freight to keep our supply chain moving. So that is a lot quicker to respond, we've seen, in terms
Okay.
of cost and kind of volume impacts. But just kind of what Jean was mentioning with the flexibility of just being able to kind of take what comes and then see what we need to do to keep things moving.
Okay. Well, let's take it back a little further then. If these haven't really been a big impact on you, what about since COVID? What sort of recovery efforts or different strategies, mitigation strategies have you had to take just to keep supply chain moving since that COVID
During
pause?
the kind of the peak of the COVID, that was definitely much more bracing for our kind of supply chain. We were definitely, I was on the phone all hours of the day with different crane teams in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, in all different parts of the world, making sure that we can keep things moving, because at that time they would get an allocation of containers or space on a LCL vessel or air freight, and they would have to make decisions sometimes within minutes. So
Yeah.
having just that flexibility and transparency with a trusted partner like Crane, just being able to say, hey, we have X amount of stuff moving from this port to this port, while it might not be your typical lane or your typical preferred rate, we just kind of had to roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. I would like to open it up to the crowd here to see, maybe put your view on gallery so you can see everybody. All of you are experienced shippers, or at least, dabbling in shipping. Tell us about some of the mitigation strategies that you are taking since some of these big challenges have occurred at the Red Sea. Anybody else directly impacted by this? Anybody willing to share their story? Just unmute yourself and put your camera on, if you will, so we could see you. Nobody? Come on. Everybody's
Sure, I'll jump
shut.
in while everybody's thinking
Sure,
of their
sure.
answers. We chose the exact wrong time to launch a new product, and we had a bunch of goods coming from Southeast Asia and to our Europe facility. And the difficulty was to try to get something there. Obviously, as Jean mentioned, going around the Cape was an option, but we were just like I said, in the midst of a brand new product launch. So we had to air freight a bunch of goods direct from Southeast Asia to Italy. And then now for the ongoing, we used what Jean described before as the kind of sea air option. So we're trying some of that out as we get a little more time, but really there was just no way to plan for something like that. I mean, that's we keep saying those things are unprecedented, but they keep happening. So I guess they're not unprecedented anymore. But so we just have to be prepared and so direct air freight was what we chose to do. But we looked at everything. We looked at rail across, all trying to get through the landmass and just ended up have to do air in the end.
Yeah. I am curious about this sea air freight option. Gene, maybe you could just walk us through, how do you prepare for that, and what sort of hurdles do you have to jump through to be able to offer that option, and what sort of I don't know, how does it work? Like, just explain. It's not a very common thing, but I guess it's becoming more common. So tell us how the air and sea can work together to help mitigate some of this.
Sure. Well, the sea air product is going to be a longer transit time, obviously, because one of the legs will be by ocean. But normally, under normal circumstances, I think the industry had been moving cargo from the Far East to Europe through the Middle East. So it would go on a vessel, an ocean vessel to Jebel Ali, for example. Then it'd be rehandled there, and then put into a ULD in Dubai, and flown from Dubai to various airport hubs across Europe or the Mediterranean. But knowing that anything really is at risk going into the Middle East right now, we didn't really want to take that chance. So we figured we would just put it on an ocean vessel, and one of the faster ocean services. So CMA CGM, Matson, Zim are also known for their fast services, Trans-Pacific eastbound services to Los Angeles. So we will put it on one of those vessels to Los Angeles, where it would be rehandled in our facility, and then we would load on a air cargo carrier from there to Frankfurt or Amsterdam or other airports across Europe. So with that, everything would be priced on a per kilo basis. So it's easier for the decision makers that are looking at a air sea solution, that, if they do need to deviate from their standard air product or air cargo solution, that everything is on a per kilo basis, rather than having to deal with something that's on a per container basis and how is it broken down. So we have the calculator that our clients can use to figure out what that cost will be.
Yeah. Okay, good. Curious about, we've talked about some of the transit time delays. Are you attributing it to just having to reroute your ocean portions, or is it because of, so you also getting transit time delays due to congestion or customs clearance, or like what do you attribute the transit time delay specifically to?
Not so much customs clearance, but it's definitely the overall transit time. So again, it could take anywhere from 10 to 14 days extra to go around the Cape of Good Hope, around the tip of South Africa, right? To get up to North Europe, or even coming to the US around the Cape, it's going to take probably about a week to 10 days longer in transit time. But at the same time, when we were talking about the Asia-Europe services, once the vessel gets into Europe, I mean, these are larger vessels. You have normally scheduled vessels that are intra-Europe or for the other, or transatlantic for the other trade lanes. And then you have these vessels that are not, or that weren't previously scheduled, now coming in to berth and basically to unload or load containers at these terminals. So based on the unscheduled arrivals, it did cause a little bit of a backup and delays. So now that we are seeing the vessels on a regular cadence or on a regular schedule going, to and from Asia around the Cape of Good Hope, I think there's a little bit more regularity to the schedules now. So it hasn't been as much of an issue with congestion, but it did exist in the beginning. And like it was mentioned on the call earlier, that containers had also, or equipment availability had also been an issue when this first started as well.
Yeah. Let me turn to Rob and Mike. Have you guys had, lost customers due to the delays, or have you had to change suppliers due to these supply chain delays ever since COVID? Have you, I think Rob, you mentioned bringing some of your suppliers back home to the US. What about
Mhm.
nearshoring? Are you starting to produce things yourself? Give us a little lay of the land on what the delays are doing to your businesses.
Yeah, I did mention that we unfortunately some of that kind of bringing the supply chain back to the US has been a little bit difficult. But again, because the raw materials required to manufacture some of our parts are still coming from overseas. So now
Sure.
it just transferred the problem to somebody else. So that in itself hasn't worked very well. But what we have done is, yeah, tried to figure out how much more can we manufacture in the US
Mhm.
and try to eliminate some of this. But again, our difficulty is because we're a global company with multiple manufacturing locations throughout the world. We have a supply chain, and we try to keep common suppliers throughout the world. So there's European suppliers and Asian suppliers. So we're still struggling to get those. It's the raw materials. So we can put together a process to manufacture almost anywhere, but the raw materials are really what is those are the items that we're moving via ocean.
Okay. What about Mexico? Is Mexico a market where you're considering maybe manufacturing or trying to import other supplies? They've since surpassed China, or as our #1 US trading partner. Just curious about
Right.
Mexico, if that's an option for you all.
For us, we're not exploring Mexico from that perspective. We are just over the next couple of months, we're gonna start exporting to Mexico. So we'll be going the other direction, but nothing on the inbound side at the moment. We kind of want to keep control of our manufacturing here in the US and
Okay. Okay, what about you, Mike? Are you having to find new suppliers, or have you lost customers because of these delays?
The immediate issues that we haven't really seen the massive customer impact yet, thankfully. And that really also doesn't impact our transit times a ton, being that we move stuff primarily from Southern Asia into the West Coast, and then either truck it or primarily rail it into Colorado, and then finally up into the Boulder area. We see some stuff domestically that slows down things a little bit with congestion at the port or congestion on the rail, but nothing substantial. At least nowhere near compared to what we saw back in the height of the COVID issues. That was massively impactful. I think at one point I had 12 to 15 containers that sat in Seattle for 8 to 10 weeks.
Wow.
And in the pre-COVID days, that was longer than our entire kind of lead time. So
Wow.
having something sit at one port stagnant for that amount of time was massively impactful. But then at that time, everybody was dealing with those same issues. So it wasn't like
Yeah.
we were unique to our retail customers in that sense.
Okay. Thanks for
Karen, can I jump in on
Yeah,
that?
sure, please.
Speaking of that, we just started opening up a lot more. We got a lot more suppliers in China now, and so we're having a lot of goods that are coming to the West Coast. So, Gene, I wanted to ask your opinion. A few years ago, we had strikes and we had Long Beach issues in Long Beach and LA, and we normally don't bring goods that way, so it really didn't affect us too badly. But now we're going to start doing that. So what do you anticipate for that going forward?
Right. So, well, I mean, even before the Baltimore situation, we've seen a little bit of congestion at the West Coast ports, specifically Los Angeles, Long Beach. There have been, 3, 4, 5, 6 days dwell time at the terminal. So there have been some delays. We are also hearing from the ocean carriers that a lot of the rail contracts are up for renewal this year. So, be prepared for potential cost increases between 10 to 15% solely on the inbound or on the inland leg alone. So we're not talking about the ocean freight here, but for the rail contracts. So any IPI locations or inland locations like Denver, Chicago, Memphis, anything that could be served via the West Coast, those rail, especially for the UP and BNSF, those are being renegotiated. So, that's something to definitely watch out for, in addition to the congestion. So the congestion could come from clients that are going to be, or shippers that are going to be routing their all-water East Coast cargo, or whatever that they're trying to avoid the Panama Canal and doing more over the West Coast. I think we'll start seeing that a little bit more right in the middle of peak season, right? So between July and October, November period. So especially because the ILA negotiations are coming. So the International Longshoremen's Association, the labor union's contract expires on September 30th. So because of that, I think there is a fear of a potential strike on the East Coast or the Gulf or East and Gulf Coast. So, with that, I think a lot of shippers will try to move their cargo proactively over the West Coast, and try to avoid any delays or try to avoid any congestion or delays there as well. So that's something to potentially expect later on this year.
Okay. Gina, I'm going to ask you to put your genie hat on. This increased demand of, more inland transit and trying to come up with alternatives to ocean. Is it going to have a ripple effect of pricing? You're going to have increased demand. You're obviously going to have limited supply. What percentage do you see pricing going up in demurrage or inland transit or any of the other customs fees, anything else going up that we can prepare for?
I don't think I personally don't foresee any of the other costs increasing by much.
Okay.
But I think the ocean carriers will certainly look to reduce their free time allowances. So a lot of shippers have been grandfathered into extended free time, whether it's demurrage or detention, especially detention, where they have up to 21 days free time. Equipment is going to be scarce, or is expected to be scarce, or always going to be challenged. So they're going to want to have their equipment turned around right away, right? So as soon as the full load is delivered, they want the empty back and headed back to Asia. And because of the service integrity or the schedule integrity being a challenge, they're going to want a little bit more consistency in terms of equipment turnaround from us as an entire segment of service providers as well as shippers. So that is something that will result in an increased costs if you don't really look at your supply chain and just assume that 10 days is written in or 14 days is written into your contracts or agreements.
Yeah.
If they take that away, if it's something that you absolutely need, that's something to be careful of.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep asking questions unless you guys do. So please put your questions in the chat or make it known to me that you want to ask a question. I'm happy to turn over the mic to you. I've got a couple of human interest questions to ask if nobody else has a question, but I'll pause here a moment to see if anybody does. I can't necessarily see all of you at once, so maybe a little quick note in the chat would be helpful. Human interest questions. So the ship that hit the bridge in Baltimore, it ran out of power. I'm guessing that's got to happen quite often at some point, that ships run out of power. So why is it that there's no generator or anchor or just human interest question? How do you mitigate that on a carrier like that when you're in the middle of the ocean, you run out of power? What does one do? I'm just curious. I haven't heard the press really say much about that. I'm just curious. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there's usually tugboats and others that can come for rescue if the power does go out. Not quite sure what exactly happened this time around, but I know, or at least from what I've heard or what I've read, that they tried to drop anchor immediately to stop the vessel from moving forward and creating even more damage. But obviously that wasn't done quickly enough, or that didn't have too much of an impact. But yeah, power certainly does go out, and I'm sure there are emergency procedures in place for that. I do think it was quite rare though that it would happen. That something like that would happen just so quickly upon departing the port. So I'm not quite sure what exactly happened, or that
Yeah.
there should be backup systems in case
Yeah, you
power
would
does go
think,
out.
huh? Like it's just shocking to me that can happen these days. But I guess, accidents do occur. But so we do have a question in the chat. Are you seeing parties resulting to the force majeure due to costs or delays due to the Red Sea or Panama issues you mentioned? It's a good question.
So force majeure. So carriers have already implemented force majeure for the Baltimore situation, and have opened up a lot of contracts that are already in place, saying that everything has to be renegotiated because of the situation at hand. So cargo that's already gated in or has been returned full to those to the terminal, obviously can't move out without customs formalities and will need to be moved. Everything is being moved at cost to the shipper. So, we also talk about contingency plans, moving these containers that are now stuck in Baltimore to Norfolk or New York or Philadelphia or Wilmington for loading onto other vessels or other services. But again, that additional cost to move it from Baltimore to other ports, or even the inbound containers that were supposed to be discharged in Baltimore that are now being discharged in New York or Norfolk. I got an email this morning from a carrier saying, hey, you have the choice of either New York or Norfolk for discharge. Which do you want? And
Yeah,
of course, it's going to, of course, to move it to the final destination is going to be at our cost or our client's cost. So that force majeure has already been declared for containers that have already that were on that vessel, that were on the Dali, that have been impacted. I think general average will eventually be declared, but so far, I mean, I think it's still under investigation. So I don't believe I've seen any news on that. But force majeure has been declared for many instances, even the Red Sea situation. But I mean, that's for cargo that had already moved, where a vessel had been attacked, force majeure for that. But anything that was avoidable or now being routed around the Cape of Good Hope is not a force majeure situation, because we obviously know of the alternate routing that's taking place. So it would
right.
be with everyone's, I mean, they would know what the additional costs would be, or people would be cognizant of what those updated charges are. So
Sure.
no.
Sure. I'm sure everybody on the call knows force majeure, but you did throw in general average. So I'm just we train about general average in our classes at the World Trade Center. But maybe you could just give a quick, what is general average? Have they figured out how much people are going to have to pay for this recent incident? Explain how it works, just for those that might be newer.
Well, so general average is based on, well, actually, I mean, if you're teaching the class.
Well, I could do it, but I thought maybe I should ask you.
Yeah, but I mean, force majeure is basically, it's an act of God or war
Sure.
or anything that is going to impact the shipment, or there could be a delay in transit or rerouting that's required, and the cost would be borne, or basically the ocean carrier would have to terminate the shipment, and the rest of the journey, I guess, would have to be based on would be borne by the shipper.
Okay.
General average would be, oh gosh.
I can help you out a little bit, but I could
Sure.
be, slightly I don't know, misstating it. But if your ship hits a bridge, for instance, or is damaged in transit, like hits the port, or even it sinks and floods, then those who are shipping on
They'll
that
have
carrier, on that vessel, share in the costs of that damage. And this is why it's so important to have cargo insurance, to make sure you can help offset some of those challenges. But a lot of shippers may not know that that's the case. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So they're still
perfect.
figuring out the cost right now, so I haven't seen any notices on
Yeah, I
that.
haven't either. I think they're still calculating. It's gonna be a while. So, last question I have, unless somebody else does, security. So we're going through Houthi rebels, get on your ship. Like, what other increased security can you do as a shipper, or what can the vessels do to increase their own security? We've all seen the Tom Hanks movie. So it's like, what can happen here? Like, what else can we do to mitigate some of those security risks? I think we've got to protect those who are in the industry. Any thoughts
Good
there?
question. Good question. I know that the ocean carriers have hired their own private security firms to be on those vessels as they transit through the Red Sea or in areas where there are a lot of pirate attacks. They put water cannons on board as well to try to or arm themselves as well to make sure that they can avoid pirate attacks. And of course, they also have military escorts.
Mm.
So the governments like of the U.S., France, and others out there are now offering escorted passage through that area. And of course, that all costs money, not necessarily just the taxpayers, but the ocean carriers that are involved. So that is all being added to the final bill that we see on some
Yeah.
of these bills relating.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
Well, let me open up. Rob, do you have a question for Jean or anything else you'd like to say?
no, I just
Okay.
there's so many things to kind of worry about now.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
I don't
okay.
want to leave this in a
No, the
moment.
average thing kind of threw me off. I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't know that. So that's a new one on me.
Okay, we got to get you into some of our classes, Rob. We teach that stuff. We teach how to do all your export docs and be trade compliant and all that. We have many people here on the call that attend some of our trainings. Mike, anything you'd like to share just to final words here?
I just thank you guys for putting this on. It's always a great asset to have the World Trade Center in our backyard, and the crane team also does a great job. All the different teams around the world that have helped us keep our supply chain moving whenever the next thing comes to try and disrupt it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the shout out. And Jean, let me just say that I think the reason we haven't had a very inquisitive group today is because Crane is so great at answering those questions on the fly. Mark does such a good job here in this region, and a lot of people here are on the call because of his great support and outreach. So you are well represented with him in our region. And I just want to commend you for just for being a leader in the space, and thank you for coming and sharing your expertise with us today. It was really, really insightful.
I appreciate the opportunity. And there's
Yeah.
Diana Rossi as well, who's also a member.
I am here. Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Hey,
Diana, I'm sorry.
everybody.
You were on a different page on
I know,
my
it's so
things.
weird.
I'm
I
so
couldn't-
sorry. Diana also is a rock star in this region. So thank you, Diana, for all that you do too for the World Trade Center. And I appreciate you helping us line up our local speakers as well. Why don't I wrap us up then? We only have a couple minutes left. Thank you all for joining us today. This is one of many World Trade Center events that we put on a regular basis. Matter of fact, our next event is on the 10th of April, and it will be all on e-commerce and some great strategies to launch or to improve your e-commerce story. And we're featuring some Colorado companies in that. If you actually would like to be featured, if you've got a great e-commerce story you'd like to share, please contact me. But UPS is going to be here. They're going to help us share some of their best practices. And then, of course, we have several government agencies that will be here as well. Exim Bank, SBA, the U.S. Commercial Service, and more. So we really do hope you'll join us. This is an in-person event on April 10th, and there's more information on our website. Karen can put our website in here so you can find out more information about it. Also, I just wanted to plug World Trade Day. World Trade Day is the largest global business conference that we put on every year. It's in the 51st year this year, which is incredible. And our World Trade Day event is the largest of its kind, I think, in the nation. It draws a regional crowd. So Jean, you'll have to come out for it. It's on May 29th, and it'll be downtown at the Grand Hyatt. And we are putting together a fabulous event, again, with keynote speaker. We've locked in the Global Procurement Vice President of United Airlines. So you're going to hear all about airline supply chains, which is a pretty complicated supply chain mix. So I think we'll hear about their trade issues and how they manage a global fleet. We also have a number of breakout sessions on forced labor and supply chain mitigation and trade compliance and all of the things. So really highly recommend this year's event. There'll be an expo and there'll be a reception as always. So please join us, and there's more information on our website about that. And then finally, I just let one last plug. If you're not already a member of the World Trade Center Denver, why not join us? We're a great group and we talk about trade issues all the time. We're trade nerds, trade geeks. We embrace that. And we hope you'll join our community of other trade aficionados. Karen is going to be sending an email about how to join our global hub. And that's a digital portal where I really hope we'll keep this conversation going. Maybe you were shy to ask a question today, but perhaps you could ask it in our digital hub called the Global Hub. And we'll have an open forum there. And I'm hoping some of the experts here on the screen will chime in and answer those questions. So that brings us to a wrap. Thank you all for coming. And happy spring. Hopefully it's going to stick for good this time in Denver. So appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Take care.
Thank you
Well
all.
done, everybody.
Bye.